Imagine this. You're standing in a world where the air bites at your skin like 1,000 needles. The wind howls through skeletal trees, their branches clawing at a steel-gray sky. Snow blankets everything, fields, rooftops, even the narrow paths between villages, turning the landscape into an endless sea of white. It's beautiful, sure, but also deadly. The cold doesn't just touch you, it invades you, creeping into your bones until every breath feels like ice scraping against the inside of your chest. And there you are, huddled around a flickering fire that barely pushes back the darkness or the chill. What would you do? How long could you last? This wasn't some far-off dystopian nightmare. This was medieval Europe. Every year, winter came like a thief in the night, stealing warmth, light, and life itself. For months on end, people lived under its icy tyranny, surviving, or not, on little more than scraps of food, thin layers of clothing, and sheer willpower. Yet somehow they endured. Somehow they found ways to keep going when the odds seemed insurmountable. Let's pause for a moment and think about what that must have been like. Today, if the heat goes out in your house, you might call a repair service or turn up the thermostat on a space heater. But imagine living in a time before central heating, before supermarkets stocked shelves year-round, before modern medicine could treat frostbite or pneumonia. Imagine relying entirely on what you had stored away during autumn, and knowing that if those supplies ran out, there was no backup plan. Would you panic? Would you give up? Or would you dig deep, finding strength you didn't know you had? That's exactly what medieval people did. Year after year, they faced winters so brutal they make our modern complaints about power outages or shoveling driveways sound almost laughable by comparison. They didn't just survive these conditions, they adapted, innovated, and supported one another. In doing so, they proved something remarkable about humanity. We are capable of extraordinary resilience when pushed to our limits. Think about that word, resilience. It's a buzzword now, thrown around in self-help books and motivational speeches. But for medieval Europeans, resilience wasn't just a concept, it was a way of life. When the temperature dropped and the days grew shorter, they didn't have the luxury of retreating into comfort. Instead, they leaned on each other, forming tight-knit communities bound together by necessity and shared struggle. They celebrated small victories, a successful harvest, a neighbor lending a hand, the first signs of spring, and used those moments to fuel their determination to keep going. So why does this matter? Why should we care about how people lived hundreds of years ago? Because their stories remind us of something fundamental about ourselves. We may live in a world filled with technology and convenience, but at our core, we're still the same species that braved the harshest winters without electricity or indoor plumbing. Their struggles echo in our own lives, whether we're dealing with literal storms or metaphorical ones. Picture yourself sitting beside that hearth fire again. The flames dance wildly, casting flickering shadows on the walls. Outside, the wind rattles the shutters, and snow piles higher against the door. Inside, though, there's warmth, not just from the fire, but from the people gathered around it. Families, friends, neighbors, all pressed close, sharing what little they have. Someone tells a story, another sings a song. For a few precious hours, the weight of winter lifts, replaced by laughter and connection. Doesn't that sound familiar? Haven't we all experienced moments like that? Times when coming together made the impossible feel bearable? Whether it's helping a friend move, rallying around someone in need, or simply enjoying a cozy evening with loved ones, we instinctively understand the power of community. Medieval people knew it too, perhaps better than anyone. And yet, as much as their resilience inspires us, it also humbles us. Could we endure what they did? Could we face months of relentless cold, hunger, and uncertainty without breaking? Maybe, maybe not. But one thing is certain. Their example challenges us to be stronger, kinder, and more resourceful. It reminds us that no matter how dark things get, there's always hope, and always a reason to keep fighting. Because here's the thing about winter. It always ends. No matter how long or harsh it is, spring eventually comes. Medieval people clung to that promise, holding on to it with every fiber of their being. And when the first green shoots finally broke through the frozen ground, they celebrated, not just because the worst was over, but because they had made it through together. So the next time you find yourself grumbling about the weather, or anything else really, take a moment to reflect. Think about the countless generations who came before us, who faced unimaginable hardships with courage and grace. Let their resilience inspire you. Let their hope guide you. Because if they could brave the darkest season with heads unbowed, Then surely we can face whatever challenges come our way. Winter is coming, but so is spring, and until then we'll endure. Together. As the golden hues of autumn began to fade, medieval Europe transformed into a hive of activity. This was no ordinary season. It was the calm before the storm, the last chance to prepare for the unforgiving months ahead. Every village, every household, and every individual played their part in what felt like a race against time. Survival wasn't just about enduring winter, it was about outsmarting it. In the fields, farmers worked tirelessly to bring in the final harvest. Grain was threshed and stored in granaries, while vegetables were carefully preserved in root cellars. Apples were turned into cider or dried for later use, and livestock that couldn't be fed through the winter were slaughtered. The meat was salted, smoked, or hung in cold larders to keep it from spoiling. Every scrap counted because come January, there would be no second chances. Firewood was another lifeline, and gathering it became a communal effort. Entire families ventured into nearby forests, axes swinging as they chopped down trees and dragged logs back home. Children carried smaller branches, piling them high until their arms ached. Villagers without access to woodlands bartered goods or offered labor in exchange for fuel. It wasn't uncommon to see neighbors helping one another stack timber against stone walls or under makeshift shelters, ensuring it stayed dry for when the snow arrived. Homes also needed attention. Thatched roofs were patched up to prevent leaks, and cracks in wooden shutters were sealed with mud or straw. Chimneys were cleaned to reduce the risk of deadly fires, a constant threat during winter. Those who could afford it added extra layers of insulation, stuffing rags or moss between beams to hold back the biting winds. For peasants living in humble cottages, these repairs often meant the difference between life and death. But perhaps the most remarkable aspect of autumn preparations was the sense of community. In a world where survival depended on cooperation, people came together in ways that transcended social boundaries. Lords might lend tools to tenant farmers, while wealthy merchants shared surplus supplies with struggling families. Even rival villages sometimes pooled resources, knowing full well that winter spared no one. There was an unspoken understanding. If we don't help each other now, none of us will make it. And so, as the days grew shorter and the air crisper, medieval Europe readied itself for the inevitable. Barns brimmed with hay, pantries overflowed with preserves, and hearths crackled with test fires. Yet beneath this flurry of activity lay a quiet tension. Everyone knew that no matter how much they prepared, winter always found a way to test them. But for now, there was hope, a fragile but powerful force that kept them moving forward. Then came the first snowfall. At first, it seemed almost magical, a pristine blanket covering the earth, muffling sound and softening the jagged edges of the landscape. Children laughed as they built crude snowmen, their cheeks flushed pink from the cold. Farmers paused mid-task to admire the fleeting beauty of frost-dappled trees glistening in the pale sunlight. For a brief moment, winter felt like a gift rather than a curse. But that illusion didn't last long. As the days passed, the temperatures plummeted, and the initial charm gave way to dread. Snow piled higher, turning roads into impassable barriers and cutting off villages from the outside world. Rivers froze solid, halting trade and leaving shelves bare in markets. The once gentle breeze sharpened into a biting wind that cut through clothing like knives. What made winter truly unbearable, though, wasn't just the physical toll, it was the psychological weight. Imagine waking up every morning to gray skies and endless darkness. Days blurred into nights, and the absence of sunlight left people feeling drained and hopeless. Depression crept in, feeding on isolation and fear. Families huddled together indoors, their conversations growing quieter as the weeks dragged on. Some turned to prayer, seeking solace in faith, while others drowned their sorrows in ale or mead. For those who dared venture outside, the challenges were relentless. Travelers risked their lives navigating treacherous paths slick with ice. Many never returned, swallowed by blizzards or buried in avalanches. Their frozen bodies wouldn't be discovered until spring thaw, a grim reminder of winter's lethal power. Even simple tasks like fetching water became Herculean feats. Wells froze over, forcing people to melt snow for drinking water, and even then, dehydration was common since melted snow provided little hydration. The psychological toll extended beyond individuals to entire communities. Fear of starvation loomed large as food stores dwindled. Arguments broke out over rationing, and theft became more frequent. Yet amidst the chaos, there were still glimmers of humanity. Neighbors checked on one another, sharing what little they had left. Elders told stories of winters past, reminding younger generations that spring always followed. These small acts of kindness helped stave off despair, offering a lifeline to those teetering on the edge. Winter wasn't just a season. It was a state of mind. It tested not only physical endurance but mental resilience. And while the first snowfall may have brought wonder, the reality that followed demanded strength few today can fully comprehend. If you think winter hit everyone equally, think again. While both rich and poor suffered, the nature of their hardships differed dramatically. Kings and nobles lived in castles with thick stone walls designed to withstand sieges, but those same walls trapped the cold inside. Drafty halls and damp chambers turned luxurious estates into icy fortresses. Wealthy lords wrapped themselves in fur-lined cloaks and warmed their beds with heated bricks, yet they still shivered through long winter nights. For peasants, however, the struggle was far more visceral. Their homes, crudely constructed huts with dirt floors and thatched roofs, offered little protection against the elements. Thin walls let in drafts, and smoke from indoor fires filled the air, making breathing difficult. Families crammed together for warmth, sharing body heat and whatever meager blankets they owned. Meals consisted of coarse bread, watery stew, and occasionally a scrap of meat. If they were lucky, hunger gnawed at their stomachs and illness spread quickly in cramped quarters. Despite these disparities, winter had a way of leveling the playing field. No amount of wealth could command the sun to shine or the crops to grow. Even kings faced shortages, forced to ration supplies and tighten belts alongside their subjects. Royal treasuries groaned under the strain of keeping courts warm and fed, while merchants jacked up prices on firewood and grain. The gap between classes narrowed, not out of choice but necessity. This shared struggle fostered a surprising sense of unity. During autumn preparations, lords often lent tools or distributed surplus food to tenant farmers. In return, peasants worked harder to ensure their lords' lands remained productive. When blizzards struck, villagers banded together to dig out stranded travelers or repair collapsed roofs. Young men checked on elderly widows, bringing them firewood or fixing leaky shutters. One such widow, Agnes, nearly gave up hope when her hands trembled too much to light a fire. But then Tom, a strapping lad from the village, knocked on her door with an armful of logs and a pot of stew. Moments like these weren't rare, they were essential. Even festivals served as equalizers. On Plough Monday, traditionally celebrated after Epiphany, lords and peasants alike joined in rituals marking the start of the agricultural year. Ploughs were blessed, oxen yoked, and fields prepared for planting. Though the worst of winter still lingered, these ceremonies offered a tangible promise of renewal. For one day, at least, the rigid hierarchies of medieval society softened, replaced by a shared anticipation of spring. Winter may have been cruel, but it also revealed the best in humanity. Whether noble or peasant, young or old, everyone endured together. They leaned on each other, drawing strength from shared purpose and collective hope. And though the seasons changed, the bonds forged during those dark months endured, a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. Winter in medieval Europe wasn't just cold, it was cruel. As the days grew shorter and the snow piled higher, food became the most precious commodity, and also the rarest. By midwinter, the carefully stored supplies from autumn's harvest were running dangerously low. Grain bins emptied, dried fruits shriveled away, and salted meats turned into distant memories. What remained was doled out sparingly, each meal smaller than the last, until families faced a grim reality. They would either have to find new sources of sustenance or face starvation. For peasants, hunger gnawed at their stomachs like an unrelenting beast. Meals consisted of coarse bread made from ground bark mixed with flour, watery stews flavored more by desperation than herbs, and whatever scraps could be scavenged. Some resorted to boiling leather boots for broth, while others chewed on tree bark or roots dug up from frozen soil. Entire villages sent men and boys into the icy fields after dark, hoping to uncover forgotten potatoes or turnips buried beneath layers of frost. But these efforts often yielded little, leaving families to go to bed with empty bellies and hollow stares. The Great Famine of 1315 serves as a chilling reminder of how fragile life was during these months. Relentless rains had rotted crops across northern Europe, plunging entire regions into chaos. Contemporary accounts describe scenes of unimaginable despair. Parents smothering their starving children to spare them prolonged suffering, neighbors stealing food from one another, and corpses littering roadsides and fields too numerous to bury properly. Dogs, horses, and even human flesh became meals for those pushed to the brink of madness by hunger. Amid such deprivation, acts of generosity stood out like candles in the darkness. In 1377, two neighboring peasant families, both on the verge of collapse, shared what little they had left for a humble meal on the feast of St. Stephen. That single act of unity gave them strength not only to survive, but also to inspire hope in others around them. Yet such moments were exceptions rather than norms. For most, winter was a gauntlet of suffering where every decision carried dire consequences. Would you share your last loaf of bread with a neighbor, knowing it might mean your own family went hungry? Or would you hoard what you had, trusting no one else? These questions haunted households everywhere. Even livestock weren't spared from the scarcity. Cows and sheep huddled together in barns, their breath steaming in the frigid air, while farmers debated whether to slaughter animals for meat or keep them alive for future breeding. Chickens stopped laying eggs, and pigs grew thin from lack of feed. Every animal represented both potential nourishment and long-term survival, a choice that weighed heavily on weary minds. By spring, many villages resembled ghost towns. Those who survived bore physical and emotional scars that lingered long after the snow melted. Hunger wasn't just a seasonal struggle. It shaped lives, relationships, and communities in ways that echoed through generations. And yet, somehow people endured, not because they were stronger than us, but because they had no other choice. If hunger didn't claim you, disease likely would. Winter's close quarters and unsanitary conditions created perfect breeding grounds for illness. The common cold might seem mild today, but back then it left sufferers red-nosed, bleary-eyed, and vulnerable to more serious infections. Respiratory ailments spread like wildfire, exacerbated by the stale, smoky air inside homes, where people huddled together around hearths. A simple cough could quickly escalate into pneumonia, a silent killer that claimed countless lives. Influenza was another relentless foe. During the winter of 1557, a virulent strain swept across Europe, decimating populations already weakened by malnutrition. In Paris alone, over 10,000 people perished within weeks. Entire families succumbed to fever, chills, and aches, their bodies unable to fight off the virus without modern medicine or vaccines. Medieval doctors, armed with treatments rooted more in superstition than science, offered little relief. Leeches, bloodletting, and herbal concoctions did nothing to stop the tide of death. Pneumonia, dysentery, and other diseases preyed on the very young and very old, whose frail bodies couldn't withstand the harsh conditions. Mass graves became all too common, especially in cities where space was limited. Chroniclers described scenes of overwhelming grief, streets deserted, shops closed, and wails of mourning echoing from houses struck by tragedy. The stench of rot rose from hastily dug pits where bodies were dumped en masse, a grim testament to the scale of suffering. For survivors, the emotional toll was profound. Imagine losing a spouse, child, or parent to illness, knowing there was nothing you could do to save them. Many carried this burden silently, burying their pain alongside their loved ones. Others turned to religion, seeking solace in prayer and pilgrimage. Churches overflowed with the faithful, their rosary beads clicking softly as they begged for divine intervention. Charity became a lifeline, with wealthier citizens donating food, clothing, and shelter to those in need. Yet, despite these acts of kindness, death remained an ever-present specter. Even kings weren't immune. King Arthur himself, according to legend, shivered beneath his robes in a drafty castle hall, teeth chattering as he spoke. Without the insulating glaciers we associate with colder climates today, medieval winters brought raging snowstorms and devastating floods that compounded the misery. Coastal flooding drowned entire villages, hurricanes flattened crops, and storm surges swallowed treasures, including King John of England's crown jewels, lost in 1216, while fleeing enemies across marshy terrain. These natural disasters added another layer of horror to an already bleak existence. Families watched helplessly as rivers overflowed, washing away homes and livelihoods. Fields once ripe with promise lay submerged under muddy waters, their fertility destroyed for years to come. Survivors clung to faith and community, finding strength in shared rituals and celebrations that marked the passage of seasons. Plough Monday processions, for example, symbolized hope for renewal, even as winter raged on. But make no mistake, winter's wrath spared no one. Whether rich or poor, young or old, everyone felt its sting. The bonds forged during these trials, acts of charity, fellowship, and resilience, became the foundation upon which medieval society endured. They remind us that even in the darkest times, humanity finds ways to shine. While hunger and disease ravaged medieval Europe, Nature itself seemed determined to test the limits of human endurance. Winter storms, coastal flooding, and hurricanes wreaked havoc on already struggling communities, amplifying their hardships and pushing them closer to collapse. These calamities weren't isolated incidents. They were recurring nightmares that left indelible marks on history. Take King John of England, whose disastrous reign included losing the crown jewels in 1216. Fleeing rebel forces, he attempted to cross the marshy Wash region during a violent storm surge. The rising waters swallowed his baggage train, including the priceless regalia. This event, though infamous, pales in comparison to the broader devastation wrought by similar natural disasters throughout the Middle Ages. Coastal flooding was particularly catastrophic. Entire villages along Europe's shores disappeared overnight, swallowed by angry seas. Homes built near rivers fared no better. Swollen waters breached banks and swept away everything in their path. Farmers watched in anguish as fertile fields turned into swamps, their hard work undone in mere hours. Crops drowned, livestock scattered, and livelihoods vanished, leaving families destitute and dependent on dwindling aid. Hurricanes, though less frequent, were equally destructive. These tempests tore through landscapes with terrifying force, flattening forests, demolishing buildings, and scattering debris for miles. One account describes a hurricane that struck northern Europe in the late 13th century, obliterating entire towns and killing thousands. Survivors emerged from rubble-strewn streets, dazed and disoriented, searching for loved ones among the wreckage. Storm surges posed another deadly threat. Sudden tidal waves inundated low-lying areas, catching residents off guard and sweeping them away before they could react. Fishermen venturing out to sea often never returned, their boats capsized by towering waves. Even inland communities weren't safe. Heavy rains triggered landslides that buried homes and blocked roads, cutting off vital supply lines. The psychological impact of these disasters cannot be overstated. Each storm, flood, or hurricane served as a brutal reminder of humanity's vulnerability. People prayed fervently for deliverance, attributing these calamities to divine punishment or supernatural forces. Priests led processions through flooded streets, sprinkling holy water and chanting prayers for mercy. Yet despite their piety, the storms kept coming, indifferent to pleas for salvation. Despite these tragedies, medieval people demonstrated remarkable resilience. Neighbors banded together to rebuild shattered homes, repair damaged infrastructure, and care for the injured. Villages organized communal efforts to clear debris and restore farmland, working tirelessly to reclaim what nature had stolen. Acts of solidarity, sharing food, sheltering displaced families, and comforting the grieving, revealed the depth of human compassion in the face of adversity. One poignant tale recounts how villagers rallied around Agnes, an elderly widow struggling to survive the winter. Her bones ached fiercely in the cold, and her trembling hands failed to kindle a fire. Just as she prepared to give up hope, a knock sounded at her door. It was Tom, a strapping lad from the village, bearing not only firewood but also a pot of stew. Such gestures, small yet profound, sustained countless individuals through the darkest days. Natural disasters may have amplified the hardships of medieval winters, but they also highlighted the strength and determination of those who endured them. Through unity, faith, and sheer willpower, people weathered storms literal and figurative, proving that even in the face of overwhelming odds, humanity endures. In the darkest depths of winter, hope wasn't just a feeling, it was an act of defiance. When survival felt like a losing battle, medieval people clung to moments of celebration and communal joy as lifelines that pulled them through. These brief respites weren't just distractions, they were reminders of life's resilience, even in the face of overwhelming odds. And nowhere was this more evident than in traditions like Plough Monday or the Feast of St. Stephen, days when laughter echoed louder than despair. Take Plough Monday, for example. This humble agricultural festival, held on the first Monday after Epiphany, marked the official start of the farming year. It may seem unremarkable today, but back then it carried profound significance. After months of biting cold and dwindling food supplies, Plough Monday symbolized renewal. Fields that had lain dormant under blankets of snow were now ready to be coaxed back to life. Farmers hitched their oxen and draft horses to plows adorned with garlands and ribbons, parading them proudly through village streets. Church bells rang out, announcing the return of activity and purpose. For a community teetering on the brink of exhaustion, this day offered something priceless, a tangible promise of spring. But it wasn't just about work. Plough Monday brought people together in ways that transcended mere survival. Neighbors who had spent weeks huddled indoors emerged into the weak sunlight, exchanging smiles and stories. Children chased each other around wagons loaded with tools, their laughter cutting through the frosty air. Elders shared tales of past harvests, reminding everyone that seasons changed, and so would this one. Even the simplest rituals, like blessing the plows before dragging them into the fields, became acts of faith, binding communities to the land and to each other. Then there was the Feast of Saint Stephen, celebrated every December 26th. If Plough Monday looked forward to spring, the Feast of Saint Stephen offered a temporary escape from winter's harsh realities. On this day, the rigid social hierarchies of medieval society flipped upside down. A lowly peasant might be crowned Lord of Misrule, presiding over feasts filled with music, dancing, and revelry. Imagine the scene. Lords and ladies serving meals to their tenants, jesters mocking authority figures, and entire villages erupting into chaotic celebration. For one fleeting moment, class distinctions melted away, replaced by camaraderie and shared mirth. These celebrations did more than entertain. They sustained spirits. Picture a young farmer named Thomas, his hands cracked and raw from chopping firewood, sitting silently by the hearth at home. His stomach growled from yet another meager meal, and his thoughts turned dark. But then someone knocked on the door, a neighbor inviting him to join the Feast of Saint Stephen festivities. Reluctantly, he stepped outside, only to find himself swept up in a whirlwind of color and noise. The warmth of the crowd, the scent of roasted meat, and the sound of fiddles playing lively tunes reignited something inside him. By the end of the night, Thomas returned home not just with a full belly, but with renewed determination to endure until spring. Even quieter moments mattered. In village squares, communal fires drew people out of their homes, if only for a short while. Around these crackling flames, neighbors exchanged jokes and sang songs, their voices rising above the howling wind. Young lovers stole kisses beneath starlit skies, undeterred by the cold. Children shrieked with delight as they skated across frozen ponds, their cheeks pink with exertion. For a few precious hours, the weight of winter seemed lighter, its grip less suffocating. Such moments weren't luxuries, they were necessities. Without them, despair might have consumed entire communities. Instead, these sparks of joy kept hope alive, burning steadily even in the coldest nights. They reminded people that no matter how bleak things seemed, life went on. Seasons changed. Spring always followed winter, and as long as they held on to that belief, they could endure anything. Winter didn't let go easily. Even as the days began to lengthen ever so slightly, the cold clung stubbornly to the land, refusing to surrender. Each morning dawned with frost still clinging to window panes, and snow lingered stubbornly in shadowy corners. Yet, those attuned to nature's subtle cues noticed the first faint signs of change. The air smelled different, crisper, yes, but also tinged with the earthy aroma of thawing soil. Birds began chirping again, their melodies piercing the silence of barren trees. Slowly, agonizingly, the world stirred back to life. For medieval people, spotting these signs became a game of patience and observation. Farmers scanned the horizon with practiced eyes, noting the way sunlight lingered a little longer each evening. Children pressed their noses against frosted windows, watching icicles drip slowly from rooftops. Women kneading dough paused mid-task to marvel at the delicate green shoots pushing through patches of melting snow. Each small sign carried immense meaning, a whisper of hope amid the lingering gloom. The brutal winters of medieval Europe weren't just seasons, they were teachers. Each frostbitten finger, each empty belly, and each icy grave left behind lessons that shaped not only individual lives but entire generations. To survive in such conditions required more than physical endurance. It demanded a deep understanding of resilience, cooperation, and the cyclical nature of life itself. These lessons didn't fade with the snowmelt. They became part of humanity's collective wisdom, passed down through stories, traditions, and shared values. One of the most profound lessons was the importance of preparation. Medieval people knew all too well that autumn wasn't just a time for harvests and festivals, it was a race against time. Every bushel of grain stored, every log chopped, and every roof patched represented hope for the future. This mindset extended beyond winter survival into broader aspects of life. They learned to plan ahead, to anticipate challenges before they arrived, and to value foresight over short-term gratification. Even today, we see echoes of this lesson in modern practices like budgeting, emergency preparedness, and sustainable living. The idea that an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure has its roots in the hard-earned wisdom of those who braved medieval winters. Another critical takeaway was the power of community. Winter forced people to rely on one another in ways few other circumstances could. When food ran low or fires went out, neighbors stepped up. A single loaf of bread shared between families wasn't just an act of kindness, it was an investment in mutual survival. This spirit of solidarity fostered bonds that transcended social hierarchies, creating networks of trust and support that strengthened communities as a whole. Over time, these connections evolved into cultural norms, emphasizing charity, hospitality, and collective responsibility. Today, we still benefit from this legacy when we come together during crises, whether it's shoveling a neighbor's driveway after a blizzard or donating supplies to those affected by natural disasters. Perhaps the most enduring lesson was the ability to find meaning in suffering. For medieval people, winter wasn't just a test of survival. It was a reminder of life's fragility and beauty. The contrast between the bleakness of winter and the promise of spring taught them to cherish small joys, the warmth of a fire, the laughter of children, the taste of fresh greens in April. These moments weren't trivial, they were lifelines, keeping hope alive in the darkest times. This perspective helped shape a worldview rooted in gratitude and perseverance, qualities that continue to inspire us today. It's no coincidence that many modern self-help philosophies echo the same message. Focus on what you can control, celebrate small victories, and never lose sight of brighter days ahead. These experiences also profoundly influenced how future generations approached life. Children growing up in medieval Europe absorbed these lessons early, learning firsthand about sacrifice, patience, and resilience. Elders passed down practical knowledge, how to insulate homes, preserve food, and treat frostbite, as well as emotional tools like storytelling and humor. Through tales of hardship and triumph, they instilled a sense of pride in their descendants, reminding them of the strength and ingenuity that ran through their bloodlines. As centuries passed, these lessons adapted to new contexts, influencing everything from agricultural techniques to religious beliefs to societal structures. For instance, the concept of Lent, a period of fasting and reflection leading up to Easter, can be seen as a symbolic nod to the deprivation and renewal experienced during winter. But perhaps the greatest legacy of medieval winters lies in their impact on human creativity and innovation. Facing seemingly insurmountable challenges year after year pushed people to think outside the box. They invented new methods of food preservation, developed sturdier building materials, and refined farming practices to maximize yields. Even simple innovations like using animal dung as fuel or weaving thicker fabrics were born out of necessity. In many ways, the harsh realities of winter acted as a catalyst for progress, forcing humanity to adapt and evolve. And while the specific problems faced by medieval people may no longer exist, the problem-solving skills they honed remain invaluable in tackling modern challenges. Ultimately, the lessons learned from surviving medieval winters are timeless. They remind us that adversity isn't just something to endure, it's something to grow from. By embracing preparation, fostering community, finding joy in simplicity, and innovating in the face of obstacles, our ancestors laid the foundation for the resilient societies we live in today. Their struggles may seem distant, but their wisdom continues to guide us, shaping how we navigate our own winters, literal and metaphorical. Fast forward to the present day, and it's easy to dismiss medieval winters as relics of a bygone era. After all, we have central heating, grocery delivery apps, and weather forecasts at our fingertips. But take a moment to imagine swapping your thermostat for a smoky hearth, your smartphone for a flickering candle, and your heated car seat for a drafty wagon. Suddenly, the minor inconveniences of modern winters, like delayed flights or slushy sidewalks, feel almost laughable in comparison. Yet, this stark contrast offers a powerful opportunity for reflection. By comparing our lives to those of our medieval ancestors, we gain a deeper appreciation for both the comforts we enjoy and the sacrifices made by those who came before us. Consider something as mundane as waiting for a delayed flight. Sure, it's frustrating, especially when you're stuck in an airport terminal with nothing but stale pretzels and bad Wi-Fi. But now, picture yourself stranded in a medieval village, cut off from neighboring towns by waist-deep snowdrifts. No Uber to call, no hotel room to book, no guarantee of shelter or sustenance. Suddenly, that cramped terminal doesn't seem so bad. Or think about complaining about your heating bill. Yes, it's expensive, but what if your only source of warmth was a dwindling stack of firewood? What if every night brought the very real possibility of freezing to death? These comparisons highlight just how far we've come and how much we often take for granted. Modern technology has transformed winter from a season of survival into one of convenience. We can order groceries online instead of scavenging frozen fields. We can turn up the heat with the flick of a switch rather than chopping wood in sub-zero temperatures. And yet, these conveniences haven't eliminated the need for resilience. They've simply shifted its focus. Instead of battling the elements, we grapple with different kinds of stress: work deadlines, financial pressures, and social expectations. While our challenges may look different, the underlying principles of perseverance, adaptation, and community remain the same. Recognizing this continuity allows us to honor the past while navigating the present. That said, there's immense value in stepping back and acknowledging the sacrifices made by previous generations. Imagine yourself standing in a medieval peasant's shoes, watching crops fail, feeling hunger gnaw at your stomach, and knowing that spring might not come soon enough. Now consider how those hardships paved the way for the luxuries we enjoy today. Our insulated homes, reliable food systems, and advanced medical care are built on centuries of trial and error, innovation, and sacrifice. Gratitude is a powerful tool, but it shouldn't stop at passive appreciation. By reflecting on the struggles of our ancestors, we can cultivate a greater sense of empathy and purpose in our own lives. Next time you curse a rain-snarled commute or grumble about scraping ice off your windshield, pause and ask yourself, how would someone in medieval Europe handle this situation? Would they complain, or would they simply get on with it, drawing strength from the knowledge that even the harshest winters eventually give way to spring? Adopting this mindset doesn't mean ignoring legitimate frustrations. Rather, it reframes them within a larger context, helping us maintain perspective and balance. Moreover, understanding the trials of the past encourages us to use our modern privileges wisely. Consider the environmental cost of heating our homes or powering our devices. While these technologies make life infinitely easier, they also place a burden on the planet. By remembering the resourcefulness of medieval people who relied on sustainable practices out of necessity, we can strive to reduce waste and adopt more eco-friendly habits. Similarly, recognizing the communal spirit that sustained villages through winter inspires us to strengthen our own connections, whether by volunteering, supporting local businesses, or simply checking in on neighbors during cold snaps. In essence, medieval winters serve as both a mirror and a beacon. They reflect the incredible strides humanity has made in conquering adversity, while also shining a light on the qualities that define us as a species: courage, compassion, and an unshakable belief in better days ahead. By honoring the struggles of our ancestors and applying their lessons to our own lives, we ensure that their sacrifices weren't in vain. And perhaps, as we cozy up under electric blankets or sip hot cocoa by the window, we'll spare a thought for those who once stared winter full in its icy face and refused to yield. As the last echoes of medieval winters fade into memory, we're left with a profound truth that stretches far beyond the boundaries of time and place. Humanity, fragile yet fierce, vulnerable yet unyielding, has always carried within it an ember of resilience. It flickers in the darkest nights, burns brighter in the face of adversity, and refuses to be extinguished no matter how bitter the cold. This is the essence of who we are: survivors, dreamers, builders. Through every frostbitten finger and every tear shed in despair, our ancestors proved that even in the harshest seasons, hope endures. And so it does today, for you, for me, for all of us. The cyclical nature of life mirrors the turning of the seasons. Winter comes, as it always has, bringing its trials and tribulations. But just as surely as snow blankets the earth, spring follows, thawing frozen rivers and coaxing green shoots from dormant soil. Life moves in rhythms: ebb and flow, darkness and light, struggle and triumph. Our medieval forebears understood this rhythm intuitively. They didn't fight against winter, they adapted to it, finding strength in unity and solace in shared humanity. Their stories remind us that no season lasts forever. Not the storms of winter, nor the droughts of summer. Change is inevitable, renewal assured. And isn't that what makes warmth so precious? Not merely the physical kind, the cozy blankets, roaring fires, or steaming cups of tea, but the warmth of connection, kindness, and belonging. Think about the moments that bring you comfort. Laughter shared over dinner, a hug from someone you love, the quiet joy of sitting beside a friend without needing to say a word. These small acts of warmth sustain us through life's winters, just as they sustained those who came before. In their darkest hours, medieval people leaned on each other, weaving bonds of community strong enough to withstand even the fiercest blizzards. Today, those same bonds hold us together, whether we realize it or not. So, take a moment to appreciate the warmth around you. Feel the weight of your blanket, the heat radiating from your radiator, the glow of a loved one's smile. Recognize these blessings for what they are. Gifts hard-won by generations past. When you sit down to a meal tonight, think of the farmers who once braved icy fields to plant seeds in frozen ground. When you sit down to a meal tonight, think of the farmers who once braved icy fields to plant seeds in frozen ground. When you laugh with friends, remember the villagers who sang songs to lift spirits beneath leaky thatched roofs? Every comfort you enjoy exists because someone, somewhere, endured hardship and chose to keep going. But let's not stop at gratitude. Let's honor their legacy by living fully, loving deeply, and giving generously. Winter may test us, but it also teaches us to cherish the light, celebrate the fleeting, and hold fast to hope. Whether your winter is literal or metaphorical, know this: you have everything you need to endure. You carry within you the same indomitable spirit that saw countless souls through centuries of brutal cold. Draw upon it, share it, pass it on. Now, here's where you come in. If this story resonated with you, if it reminded you of the power of resilience, the beauty of community, or the promise of spring, I want you to do something simple yet meaningful. Hit like, subscribe, share this video with someone who needs a reminder of hope. Maybe it's a friend going through a tough time, a family member feeling overwhelmed, or even a stranger scrolling past on social media. Spread the message that no matter how dark things seem, brighter days are ahead. Together, we can keep the flame of human kindness alive, just as our ancestors did. Because ultimately, history isn't just about the past, it's about the present and the future too. The struggles of medieval Europe aren't confined to dusty books or ancient ruins. They live on in us, shaping the way we navigate challenges and celebrate victories. Every time you face a setback with courage, every time you extend a hand to someone in need, you become part of that ongoing story. You join the ranks of those who stared winter full in its icy face and refused to yield. As the wind whispers outside your window tonight, let it carry with it a sense of wonder at how far we've come, how much we've overcome, and how much further we can go if we choose to stand together. Let it remind you that seasons change, tides turn, and hearts heal. Even now, beneath the snow, life stirs. Roots stretch toward the sun, seeds wait for their moment to break through the surface and bloom. And so, dear listener, as we close this chapter of our journey through medieval winters, I leave you with this thought. You are stronger than you know, you are braver than you feel, and you are never truly alone. Just as the people of the Middle Ages drew strength from one another, so too can you find refuge in the warmth of community. So snuggle deeper under your blankets, safe in the knowledge that winter has been faced and conquered before. Spring will come again. Until then, may you walk forward with courage, compassion, and unshakable hope. Thank you for joining me on this exploration of history, resilience, and the human spirit. If you found value in this video, don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need a little extra light today.